All right, chapter 27.2. Where are we at? Dionysus. Footers. 1. The main clue to Dionysius's mystic history is spread of the vine cult over Europe, Asia, and North Africa. Wine was not invented by the Greeks. It seems to have been first imported in jars from Crete. Grapes grew wild on the southern coast of the Black Sea, whence their cultivation spread to Mount Nysa in Libya by way of Palestine, and so to Crete, to India by way of Persia, and to Bronze Age Britain by way of the Amber Route. The wine orgies of Asia Minor and Palestine. The Canaanite Feast of Tabernacles was originally a bacchanal orgy, where marked by much the same ecstasies as the beer orgies of Thrace and Phrygia. Dionysius's triumph was that wine everywhere superseded other intoxicants, according to Pherecydes. Nicaea means tree. 2. He had once been subservient to the moon goddess Semele, also called Thyone, or Kototeo, and the destined victim of her orgies. His being reared as a girl, as Achilles also was, recalls the Cretan custom of keeping boys in darkness, that is to say, in the woman's quarters until puberty. One of his titles was Dendrites, tree youth, and the spring festival, when the tree suddenly burst into leaf and the whole world is intoxicated with desire, celebrated his emancipation. He is described as a horned child in order not to particularize the horns, which were goats, stags, bulls, or rams, according to the place of his worship. When Apollodorus says that he was disguised as a kid to save him from the wrath of Hera, Eriphas, kid, was one of his titles. This refers to the Cretan cult of Dionysus Zagreus, the wild goat with enormous horns. Virgil wrongly explains that the goat was the animal most commonly sacrificed to Dionysus because goats injure the vine by gnawing it. Dionysus as a stag is Lurcus, whom Athamas killed when driven mad by Hera. In Thrace, he was a white bull, but in Arcadia, Hermes disguised him as a ram because the Arcadians were shepherds and the sun was entering the ram at their spring festival. The Hyades, rainmakers, into whose charge he gave Dionysus, were renamed the tall, the lame, the passionate, the roaring, and the raging ones to describe his ceremonies. Hesiod records that Hyades' earlier names as Facile, Coronis, crow, Clea, famous, Phao, dim, and Udor, generous. And Hyginus's list is somewhat similar. Nisus means lame, and in these beer orgies on the mountain, the sacred king seems to have hobbled like a partridge, as in the Canaanite spring festival called Passach, hobbling. But that Marcus fed Dionysius honey, and that the Menades used ivy twined fir branches as Thisri records an earlier form of intoxicant, spruce beer, laced with ivy and sweetened with mead. Mead was nectar brewed from fermented honey, which the gods continued to drink in the Homeric Olympus. 3. J. E. Harrison, who first pointed out that Dionysius, the wine god, is a late superimposition of Dionysius, the beer god, also called Sabazius, suggested the tragedy may be derived not from tragos, a goat, as Virgil suggests, but from tragos, spelt, a grain used in Athens for beer brewing. She adds that in early vase paintings, horsemen, not goatmen, are pictured as Dionysus' companions, that his great basket is at first a winnowing fan. In fact, the Libyan and Cretan goat was associated with wine. The Hellenic horse with beer and nectar. Thus, Lycurgus, who opposes the late Dionysius, is torn to pieces by wild horses, priestesses of the mare-headed goddess, which was the fate of the early Dionysus. Lycurgus' story has been confused by the irrelevant account of the curse that overtook his land after the murder of Dryas. Dryas was the Oak King, annually killed. The trimming of his extremities served to keep his ghost at bay, and the wanton felling of the sacred oak carried the death penalty. Katayoto was the name of the goddess in whose honor the Adonian rites were performed. 4. Dionysus had epiphanies as lion, bull, and serpent because these were calendar emblems of the tripartite year. He was born in winter as a serpent, hence his serpent crown, became a lion in the spring, and was killed and devoured as a bull, goat, or stag at midsummer. These were his transformations when the Titans set on him. Among the Orchomenans, a panther seems to have taken the serpent's place. His mysteries resembled Osiris's, hence his visit to Egypt. 5. Hera's hatred of Dionysus and his wine cup, like the hostility shown by Pentheus and Perseus, reflects conservative opposition to the ritual use of wine and to the extravagant Maenad fashion, which had spread from Thrace to Athens, Corinth, Sicyon, Delphi, and other civilized cities. Eventually, in the late 7th and early 6th centuries BC, Periander, tyrant of Corinth, Cleisthenes, tyrant of Scion, and Pelistratus, tyrant of Athens, deciding to approve the cult, founded official Dionysic feasts. Thereupon, Dionysus and his vine were held to have been accepted in heaven. He ousted Hestia from her position as one of the 12 Olympians at the close of the 5th century BC, though some gods continued to exact sober sacrifices. But although one of the recently deciphered tablets from Nestor's palace at Pylos shows that he had divine statues even in the 13th century BC, Dionysius never really ceased to be a demigod, and the tomb of his annual resurrection continued to be shown at Delphi, where the priest regarded Apollo as his immortal part. The story of his rebirth from Zeus's thigh as the Hittite god of the winds had been born from Kumabais repudiates his original matriarchal setting. Ritual rebirth from a man was a well-known Jewish adoption ceremony, a Hittite borrowing. 6. Dionysus voyaged in a new moon boat, and the story of his conflict with the pirates seems to have been based on the same icon which gave rise to the legend of Noah and the beasts in the ark. The lion, serpent, and other creatures are his seasonal epiphanies. Dionysus is, in fact, Deacolian, the Lacanian. God damn, these words are hard. The Laconians of Brazi preserved an uncanonical account of his birth, how Cadmus shut Seminole and her child in an ark which drifted to Brazi, where Semele died and was buried, and how Ino reared Dionysus. 7. Pharos, a small island off the Nile Delta on the shore of which Protus went through the same transformation as Dionysus, had the greatest harbor of Bronze Age Europe. It was the depot for traders from Crete, Asia Minor, and Aegean Islands, Greece, and Palestine. From here, the vine cult will have spread in every direction. The account of Dionysius' campaign in Libya may record military aid sent to the Garamaritaeans by their Greek allies. That of his Indian campaign has been taken for a fanciful history of Alexander's drunken progress to the Indus. but is earlier in date and records the eastward spread of the vine. Dionysus's visit to Phrygia, where Rhea initiated him, suggests that the Greek rites of Dionysus as Sabazius, or Bromus were of Phrygian origin. 8. The Corona Borealis, Ariadne's bridal chaplet, was also called the Cretan crown. She was the Cretan moon goddess and her vinous children by Dionysius, Onepion, Thios, Staphylos, Tauropolis, Latrimus, and Euthenes were the eponymous ancestors of Hellenic tribes living in Chios, Lemnos, the Thracian Chersonese, and beyond. Because the vine cult reached Greece and the Aegean by way of Crete. Onos, wine, is a Cretan word. Dionysus has been confused with Cretan Zagreus, who was similarly torn to pieces at birth. 9. Agave, mother of Pentheus, is the moon goddess who ruled the beer revels. The tearing to pieces of Hephaestus by the three sisters, who are the triple goddess as nymph, is paralleled in the Welsh tale of Pywel, Prince of Dyfed, where on May Eve, Rhionion, a corruption of Rigoratona, Great Queen, devours a fowl who is really her son, Pryderi, anxiety. Poseidon was also eaten in the form of a fowl by his father Cronus, but probably in an earlier version by his mother Rhea. The meaning of the myth is that the ancient rite in which mare-headed Maenads tore the annual boy victim, Sabazius, Bromus, or whatever he was called, to pieces and ate him raw was superseded by the more orderly Dionysian revels, the change being signalized by the killing of a fowl instead of the usual boy. 10. The pomegranate which sprouted from Dionysius' blood was also the tree of Tammuz, Adonis, Ramon. Its ripe fruit splits open like a wound and shows the red seeds inside. It symbolizes death and the promise of resurrection when held in the hand of the goddess Hera or Persephone. 11. Dionysius' rescue of Semele, renamed Thyone, Raging Queen, has been deduced from pictures of a ceremonial held at Athens on the dancing floor dedicated to the wild woman. There, to the sound of singing, piping, and dancing, and with the scattering of flower petals from baskets, a priest summoned Semele to emerge from an omphalos, or artificial mound, and come attended by the spirit of spring, the young Dionysus, At Delphi, a similar ascension ceremony conducted wholly by women was called the Heros, a feast of the heroine. Still another may be presumed in Artemis's temple at Troezen. The moon goddess it must be remembered, had 3 different aspects, in the words of John Skeleton. Diana in the leaves green, Lunas, who so bright doth sheen, Persephone in hell. Semele was, in fact, another name for Kore, or Persephone, and the ascension scene is painted on many Greek vases, some of which show satyrs assisting the heroine's emergence with mattocks. Their presence indicates that this was a Pelagesian rite. What they disinterred was probably a corn doll buried after the harvest and now found to be sprouting green. Kore, of course, did not ascend to heaven. She wandered about on earth with Demeter until the time came for her to return to the underworld. But soon after the award of Olympic status to Dionysus, the assumption of his virgin mother became dogmatic, and, once a goddess, she was differentiated from Kore, who continued heroine-like to ascend and descend. 12. The vine was the 10th tree of the sacral tree year, and its month corresponded with September, when the vintage feast took place. Ivy, the 11 tree, corresponded with October, when the Maids reveled and intoxicated themselves by chewing ivy leaves, and was important also because, like 4 other sacred trees, L's prickly oak, on which the cochineal insects fed, Phoroninius's alder, and Dionysus's own vine and pomegranate. It provided a red dye. Theophilus, the Byzantine monk, says that poets and artists loved ivy because of the secret powers it contained, one of which I will tell you. In March, when the sap rises, if you perforate the stems of ivy with an auger in a few places, a gummy liquid will exude, which, when mixed with urine and boiled, turns a blood color called lake. Useful for painting and illumination, red dye was used to color the faces of male fertility images and of sacred kings. At Rome, this custom survived in the reddening of the triumphant general's face. The general represented the god Mars, who was a spring Dionysus before he specialized as a Roman god of war, and who gave his name to the month of March. English kings still have their faces slightly rouged on state occasions to make them look healthy and prosperous. Moreover, Greek ivy, like the vine and plane tree, has a 5-pointed leaf, represented the creative hand of the earth goddess Rhea. The myrtle was a death tree. Piss cheeks.